Christmas Journey Church. Hey, you know, this weekend is chock full of all kinds of stuff, isn't it? I mean, so many things running around, some last minute Christmas stuff, all that kind of stuff. But can we talk just a little bit about some of the traditions that you wind up doing, we wind up doing? Some of you are going to open up Christmas Eve kind of gifts. Like you'll get together tonight with everybody and you'll open it up and then you have some time to sleep in tomorrow. That's a fun tradition. Another one, people get pajamas a lot for Christmas. I don't know why that matters because you open up gifts in the morning maybe, but some people don't even wear the pajamas. They just get up in the morning and put them on. I guess that's a tradition. Makes for good pictures anyway. Some people in this, kind of get together with family. Maybe that's what you're doing today, and maybe even why you're online with us is because you've got a family gathering and you chose to hey, I got to be out of town or I got to be in this place, so I'm just going to be around that. Maybe some of you leave out milk and cookies for Santa tonight. You leave those out, and we always left Mountain Dew out, But the whole thing, all the traditions, the most common tradition is that tomorrow morning, men across the country, right, will wake up and they will be filled with surprise. Dads will be filled with surprise when their kids open their gifts because we don't have any clue what they got. But the truth is, even with all of those traditions and even with all the stuff that's going on, you chose to be here. You chose to be a part of this gathering. And I think that's valuable and important because whether you want to or not, you're recognizing something that's crucial about Christmas is that Christmas isn't about a date on a calendar. Do you realize that Jesus wasn't likely born on December 25th? The reason we celebrate Christmas is on December 25th is more because of the change of seasons and pagan calendars than it is really about the birth of Jesus. It's just the date we chose to celebrate the birth of Jesus. And so Christmas isn't about a date on a calendar, and Christmas isn't about trees and gifts, although those are a blast. Right? It's not about family gatherings and movies. I love movies. I love family gatherings. I love trees. I love gifts. I love all that stuff. But what it does for us is make the significance of this holiday kind of spread out, right? It makes it a big deal. And the truth is that Christmas isn't really about the story of Jesus either. I know that sounds weird, right? I mean, to say that Christmas isn't about the story of Jesus' birth. I mean, it is, don't get me wrong. All those other things are involved too. December 25th, trees and gifts, right? Family gatherings and all the stuff with movies. Those are all a part of the Christmas time. And so is the story of Jesus. But Christmas isn't about the story of Jesus. The story of Jesus happens. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the story of the shepherds keeping watch over their fields by night and the angels breaking through in the middle of the night while the shepherds are, calm and relaxed in the dark and breaking out of the sky and telling them not to be afraid. I think that's laughable. Right? And I love the story of the wise men following the star. They find the baby wrapped in swaddling clothes. I mean, all the stuff, all those pieces of it that we all remember from every time we've ever been to church. But Christmas isn't about the nativity story. It's about a critical turning point in the story of the gospel. You see, this whole story started when we chose to do life on our own, instead of trusting the goodness of who God is. We chose to do things our own way, right? And when we did, it started off the story of God pursuing you, pursuing me. In my brokenness, in my sin, God loved me so much that he stepped out of heaven and came into this world and chose to love and to pursue me and to give his life. And so when you think about it, man, the whole idea of Christmas, as bright and fun and joyful as it is, has a little bit of a dark shadow behind it, doesn't it? When you think about the nativity, when you think about the trees and the gifts and the traditions and the movies and all the things, it looks like all light, time of joy. But right behind that is a stark contrast in the darkness of our lives. In fact, this is the very reason that Jesus said he came. In his own words, it says the Son of Man, that's his favorite way to refer to himself. The Son of Man came to seek and to save that which is lost. Now, most of the time when we read this verse, we go, hey, he came to seek and save the lost. That's what we usually think of. And now, don't get me wrong, he did come to seek and save the lost. That's one of the things, but there's more to it than that. He came to seek and save all that was lost. He came to seek and save that which was lost, not just the person that was lost, but all the things that were broken and wounded and severed and hurting and empty and purposeless. When we walked away from Jesus, it disconnected us from some significant pieces of what gives us purpose and meaning and value. You realize that most of our lives get to feel that way. I can't tell you how you feel, right? I can only tell you how I feel. I can't tell you how you act. I can only tell you how I act. But there are times when my life goes unattended where I just do the regular rhythm stuff. I sleep, I get up, I get some food and some coffee. I go to work, I endure the hardships. I come home, I grab some food. I try to carve out a little time to relax, go to bed, and do it all over again. Now listen, if I leave my life unattended, it just becomes a rhythm, and it's not just a short season. I could get over anything for a short season, right? But that becomes the way I do life. It's empty and purposeless. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to live like that. And that's the thing that Jesus came to do for us. He came to do more than just go, oh, I feel bad that you have that kind of emptiness. You see, sometimes we have a tendency to think that God's like, I feel bad for you, so I do this. God doesn't have sympathy for you. He has empathy. He stepped out of heaven so that he could empathize and take on or be with us in our burdened, empty life. In fact, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. I don't know if you know this, but sympathy is pity. It's really just pity for the circumstances that somebody else is going through. Like you see somebody else going through something, you walk up and the aisle or that thing at the funeral, and you're face to face with that person. You say, I'm sorry you have to go through this. Most of what we're saying is that we're pity them. We're pity their sorrow. We're sorry that they have to feel the way that they feel. We don't really feel any of it with them, and we really shouldn't a lot of times. I mean, we go and just pay our respects and care for people, but really it's just pity that they feel the way they feel. But when we have pity on people, not necessarily at a funeral, but in other places, when we're trying to sympathize with people, it puts us in a position of judgment, doesn't it? Like somebody gets sick, and you're like, and when you only have pity for them, you only have sympathy for them. You go, well, you shouldn't have gone outside, right? When you're without a coat on, or somebody does something, and well, maybe it's because of this. That's not empathy. That's sympathy. And sympathy is not bad, but sympathy puts us in a place of judgment about people. Sympathy is when we're thankful that we're really not experiencing what other people are experiencing. I want you to know something. God doesn't sympathize with us in our lostness, in our brokenness, in our emptiness. God doesn't sympathize with us in our emptiness. God stepped out of heaven so that he could empathize with us. Empathy is so much more significant. Empathy is when we sit and understand how a person feels. That's powerful, isn't it? When somebody's going through something hard, empathy is when we sit down next to them and we try our best to understand the way they feel, when we begin to share their burden with them. And you know the other thing that empathy does? Empathy makes room for people to be able to have whatever emotional response they have. When we just sympathize and somebody gets angry at God for something they're going through, we're like, oh, I don't understand that. Just calm down and relax. But when we empathize with people, we go, man, you're going through a hard time, and I know that's the case. And I'm really sorry you have to go through that. And I feel your pain. And when they get mad at God for it, you can go, listen, he understands. And we could sit with them and go, I understand why you feel that way. Empathy makes room for responses, even negative ones. God trusted, I'm going to say that again because God didn't trust us for this. This is not what I'm saying. God stepped out of heaven so that he could sit with us and understand us and be with us in our burdened, sometimes empty life. You know what the truth is? I got to tell you something about myself. Some people peak, in their academic performance or their physical abilities or whatever. Some people peak in like college age. That's the height of everything, right? Some people peaked in high school. Some of you were like, yeah, I peaked in high school. I was playing football at a level that nobody played. Like I just was great at it. I was doing this, I was doing that. I peaked in high school. I peaked, I think, in the 5th grade. I'm not kidding. I think I peaked in the 5th grade. I peaked in the 5th grade because after that moment, I realized pretty much the moment I entered 6th grade, I realized that I didn't think the way other people thought. I didn't process information. I didn't have the attention span that everybody else had. Back when I was a kid, they called it ADHD, they called it BRAT, right? That's the way I was referred to. I was just that bratty kid who had so much energy and couldn't sit still and couldn't pay attention. In the 6th grade, I had Mrs. Whitson was my 6th grade teacher. And Mrs. Whitson was, on her latter years of teaching, In fact, later that year, Mrs. Whitson told me that she was retiring because of kids like me. And we had this test. I remember she said, we have to memorize all 26 of these prepositions that were listed on a piece of paper, right? And she had 26 of them. Now, when I was in the 6th grade, I didn't have the attention span to read 26 words rather than even memorize them. It was ridiculous. In fact, I remember the terror that was going on in my head when I looked at this words, and I'm like, I don't even know where to begin to memorize 26 words. I'd go through the first few and then I'd lose attention. I'd go through the first few again, I'd lose attention. I never got past the first few because I'd lose attention. And the truth of it is that as much as that was a difficult time, I didn't get it, I didn't understand it, Mrs. Whitson pressed and pushed and pressed, and she was really kind of bitter and angry about it. She made me take that test over and over and over and over and over again until I got 100%. Now you're probably going, well, at least you remember it today. I said, well, people remember 9/11. That doesn't mean it's good. Mrs. Whitson's probably right now, looking up at us telling, I told you it was going to be important. The truth is that the difference between sympathy and empathy comes down to one word, and it's a preposition. It's a difference of prepositions because it all comes down to this. Sympathy is about what we feel for a person. Empathy is what we experience with a person. I know that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's a big, big deal. Sympathy is about something that's arm's length. Empathy is about something that's next to me, that's here with me. Empathy is what we feel for a person, with a person. And I want you to know something. Christianity, and Christmas particularly, is all about the with. Christmas is all about the with. When we sing around Christmas, we go to church and we sing and say things that we don't say other times of the year, We'll sing the words like Gloria, but instead of just singing Gloria like a woman's name, we stretch it out. Okay, you know what I'm saying, right? Gloria, or that next phrase in that song, right? In excelsis Deo. In excelsis Deo is a Latin phrase. I'm guessing that most of us don't even know what it is, but we're gladly sing it every 12 months, right? Gloria in excelsis Deo, right? It means glory to God in the highest. I don't know that really matters, but my guess is you're like me. I had to look it up. My guess is that you probably feel like I do about it. It was in a Christmas song, and it must be good. They've been singing it for a long time, so it seems reasonable to sing it, right? Around Christmas, we use big words like nativity, not words I use in other places. Words like Advent, that we have to think about. Words like incarnation. Other times of the year, those would be weird words to even think about, but in Christmas, we use them all the time. And another that we use is so valuable, so important, and it goes along with this idea. It's the word Emmanuel. Emmanuel just means God with us. God with us. I think this is so important. What Christmas really is God, the God of the universe, the God who said, you know what, there's darkness, there should be light, and light happened. The God who stepped out of heaven to be with us. That's what Christmas is. And so we get that from one of those prophecies we talked about last week. There are 333 of them. We're not going to go through them. I know I fried your brain a little bit last week. But one of those is in the prophet Isaiah said this almost 800 years before Jesus, by the way. 800 years, he says, the Lord himself will give you a sign. I love this because when Scripture uses an exclamation mark, it's important. And they don't use it very often. You see them here and there, but it doesn't happen very often. Here you see two of them in a row. Look, exclamation mark. Pay attention. Hark, right? The virgin will conceive a child. I feel like anytime you have the virgin giving birth to anything, there should be an exclamation mark, right? Because that deserves some emphasis. But what God is saying is the virgin's going to conceive a child, and she will give birth to the son. And we'll call his name Emmanuel, which means God is with us. He's not around us. He's not near us. Those are all prepositions. He's not by us. He's with us. He's not just excited about us or interested in us. He's with us in our journey. Empathy is a huge part of Christmas because Christmas is all about the with. God is with us in our joy, right? In the joy of Christmas. God is with us in the giving. This is a great time of year for giving, isn't it? And God's with us in the celebration. God's with us in the moments where everything's going great. But can we be honest? Things aren't always going great. It means that God is also with us in the disappointment. That God's also with us in the waiting. God's also with us in the pain. And can we just be honest? That sometimes like this idea of Christmas for some of us, even for a lot of us in some way or another, is really, really difficult. I mean, sure, we want to go through the joyous parts and we want to smile and we want to give gifts and we're not like bah humbug about it. But for some of us, and a lot of us really, the idea of Christmas is kind of a bittersweet thing. Maybe for you, this is the very first time that you've celebrated Christmas without someone that you love. Or maybe it's the 10th time and it hasn't gotten that much easier. Or maybe for you, Christmas, is great and exciting, but, the coming of Christmas just marks one more year where you've been trying to have a family. And it's just been a year full of disappointment and grief and pain. Or maybe for you, like the idea of Christmas is really exciting and you go to the things, but it feels like the gatherings only serve as like a contrast to how lonely you are. Or maybe for you, this is a Christmas where something has come between you and somebody you love. And as everybody else is talking about getting together with their family, you're thinking, I wish I could. I wish that hadn't happened. I wish she shouldn't have said that or done that, or he didn't do that. And the truth of it is that, man, we can sometimes forget that God is with us. He's with us in our disappointment. He's with us in our waiting. He's with us in our pain, because that's what he does. He wants to give us life. And life only happens when we don't already have it. I mean, some of the things are good, right? We all go to work, do our thing, come back, go through the rhythm, and then we try to eke out a little bit of life. Those are the places we don't really need much, right? But man, in the middle of the darkness and the disappointment, in the middle of the pain, in our moments of waiting, those are where we feel like it's very empty. And those are the moments where the whole idea of Christmas is God with us in the middle of the difficult, terrible times. It's really even Jesus' own words in John 10:10. We talk about this a lot. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. That's a whole sermon on its own, but it's not his day. It's Jesus' day. Jesus said, I came so that you could have life, rich and satisfying life. Other translations say abundant. Now, can we be honest? Like the idea of church and God and, being a part of this, that's not life, okay? Listen, don't get me wrong. I love being in church. For crying out loud, I started a church. I love church, but this isn't life. This is an hour. And, relationships around here are good. They're great. They're helpful. And they help bolster life, but they're not life. The life that Jesus came to give me, it happens when we live, right? When it's outside of this place. Think about it for a second. Most of the time when we think about this, that God came so that I could have a rich and satisfying life, have an abundant life, it was kind of like we thought about it like it's an exchange program. You have this empty life, but one day you're going to go to heaven and have a rich and satisfying life. Today, not so much, then an abundant life. Isn't that kind of how we think about this verse? Like it's really only talking about heaven? But can we just talk about this? That's not what this is talking about. Jesus said, I came so that you could have a rich and satisfying life. The reason that we think it's about heaven is because we don't see any hope for this life. We think, oh, well, that must be about heaven. I still got to just muddle through this one. But Jesus came so that you could have life and have it to the full, have it abundantly. Now, I got this crazy question. If you're here today and you're like holding faith in God and church and Jesus and all that stuff at arm's length, how full and how rich, how satisfying is your life, right? And now you're going, hey, listen, maybe yours isn't so much either. Maybe you're looking at me and going, hey, you just said that you get up and you go to work and you endure the hardships, you come home and you squeeze out a little life and go do, man, when I leave my life unattended and I'm not walking with God, that's exactly how it is. But the truth is that Christmas is about the God who came to be with us, to give us a rich and satisfying life now and for eternity. That's a critical difference. It's not just about going to heaven when I die. Jesus came to be with me in the disappointment, in the pain, in the waiting, but he came also to give me life, and he does that by being with us. Now listen, I'm a terrible gift giver. Now you've already learned that I peaked in the 5th grade, but I'm a terrible gift giver. Don't get me wrong, I'm a great gift buyer. I'm fantastic at gift buying. Because when Sheila wants something or I want to go get Sheila a gift, I go into a store she likes and I walk right up to a mannequin and I'm like, I'll have that. And the person who's helping out, the sales clerk will say, oh, that is a beautiful blouse. I'm like, no, not the blouse. I want the blouse, the undershirt, the jeans, the shoes, the socks. If that mannequin's wearing underwear, I want it in the bag, right? Because you've already picked it out, it matches perfectly, I'll buy all of it. And if I'm buying an electronic gift, and there's a cheaper version and a more expensive version, my general thought process is buy it right, buy it one time. And if I think I see a cheap one and a more expensive one, I just assume that the more expensive one is better. I assume that the one that is more expensive, there's a reason for it being more expensive. I will always buy the more expensive one. So I'm a great gift buyer. If you want gifts bought for you, you want to ask me to do it. But you know what I am? I'm a terrible gift giver. Because I get a gift and I'm really excited about it and I can't wait to give it away. I'm like, hey, Sheila, you got to open this. She's like, no, I don't want to open it. I want to have something to open on Christmas. And I'm like, I'll wrap up a tissue box. You open this. Now I'm so excited about it. I get excited about it. And when I wrote this whole series, planned out what we'd say at Christmas, I wrote it all hoping to get to this one moment. And I got to tell you, if you'll go back and listen to all of these weeks, I've been talking about it every week. I've been accidentally dropping hints and almost saying it again because I'm so anxious to give it to you, ready to hear it, because I think it's the most profound example of what God did, and it comes from a passage in the tail end of these verses we've been talking about. And it comes from a translation called The Message, and it says this: the Word became flesh, and this is my favorite phrase, and he moved into the neighborhood. It's not a theological concept, right? That's rich, right? It's not a church concept. It's not a religious concept. It's a personal concept. That's a rich idea. The Word, Jesus, became flesh and he moved into the neighborhood, because Christmas is all about the with. It's that verse we talked about last week. It says this, Paul said, but when the right time came, when all the circumstances that God had been preparing and planning since the very beginning of time, when we pushed away, every one of those came to the right moment. God sent his son, born of a woman, subject to the law. God sent him to buy freedom for those who were slaves to the law. That was us. We were slaves to trying to earn God's favor. You realize that every other world religion says that you've got to do something to make God happy. But Christianity says that God stepped out of heaven and became flesh and moved into the neighborhood to be with the people he loves so that he could buy freedom for those of us who were slaves to the law. And so that we could become the very children of God, adopted, grafted in, put into his life, put into his relationship, put into him. It's not a theological story. It's not a religious story. It's not just a Christmas story. It's a personal story. The God of heaven loves you. And if you were the only person breathing air, the God of heaven still would have stepped out of heaven and become flesh so that he could be with you.